Hi, I'm Rob Doucette, Vice President of Product Management at Martello, and today I'm going to take a few minutes to provide you with a brief overview of Vantage DX, Martello's solution to enhance the Microsoft 365 and Teams end-user experience. So I'm going to start here in our analytics interface. I have a few dashboards that we automatically create. So once you log into our system, provide access to your tenant, we provision these dashboards automatically on your behalf and allows you to get started looking at your Teams call quality data broken down by a few categories, such as locations, ISP performance, as well as various symptoms. Let's start by drilling into the locations. This is a completely dynamic view that represents the countries where you have Teams activity, and we can drill into any of these countries to see the details of any users in those countries that may be having a poor experience with Teams. You can take a look at any alerts that have been occurring in the past with users, in this case in Australia, and get details about their endpoint, the details of the call that happened, that in this case were a poor call, and the conditions of the network at the time of that call. Again, we're getting all this data without having to deploy any endpoints or agents at this time. I'll drill back up. We'll skip over ISPs for this demo, but take a look at symptoms. And this is where we provide a few use cases out of the box to get you started. Things like users who may be on a wireless network that are having a poor experience. You can drill in here and take a look at any users that are identified as such. And I'll call out that these are completely dynamic, so there's rules that are driving the members of this group. So as the environment changes, these dashboards are always live and up to date. And this is something that we can carve out specific use cases for your organization, whether that's particular headsets you're looking for, conditions, types of calls, all can be mapped in here as a dynamic rule, so you carve out the use cases that matter for your organization. So these dashboards, while easy to get started because they're created for you, don't always cover all the needs of a complex organization. So I'm going to transition into our business services view. And this is where we can carve out in much more detail specific slices into the environment based on the needs of your organization. So here we can see things by region, by department, by a subset of users like VIPs, or even customers if you're an MSP. I'm going to drill into an example here that I have for frontline workers out of our France location. And you'll see here now we have a breakdown of how well are end users performing for my frontline workers, how well is the application working, and how well is the infrastructure that supports all these things to perform well. So if I drill into end user, much like we just saw with the countries example, I see a list of all the users here that are my frontline workers. I have some issues here with Alain Dubois. I can take a look at the details of the alerts here. Again, like we saw earlier, all the details here, such as the endpoint that's used, the OS, the horsepower available to that machine, the duration of the call, all the conditions of the network at the call. Here I can see it was a direct routing call, so we do get visibility into PSTN users as well. Get quite a bit of information that enables me to figure out what might be going on. And I'll dive a little bit more into the diagnostics capability in just a second. The other thing we can break down here for the users, I'm going to drill into a different user here that doesn't necessarily have a problem at the moment. But one thing we hear quite a bit is, especially in the case of maybe a frontline worker where they may be roaming and using different networks, issues may be isolated to a particular device or a particular network. So this view that I'm looking at here shows me for Adele all the unique combinations of devices and networks that are being used, because often we'll find out that it's one particular combination that's the problem. The user may not recognize that when it's happening, but this gives IT the ability to quickly identify if one of these configurations is to blame. And again, much like we saw earlier, I can drill in here and get all the details about the interactions that have happened on this device on this network. So let's take a step back up and let's dig a little deeper into the diagnostics capability. So we're identifying some users who may be having problems, but we don't necessarily have all the details of why. So I'm going to drill into the infrastructure here, and these are the things that must function well for the users to have a good experience. I have a few network devices that are delivering services to these users. I'm monitoring the PSTN trunk. I'm also looking at the SBC. So in this case, as I mentioned, there's some PSTN activity happening here. And I'm actually monitoring the path to my Oracle SBC, as that must be performing well for my PSTN users to have a good experience. So let's drill in and take a look at what that looks like. So here in the Diagnostics interface, I see a number of services that we're testing, spanning things like Teams and SharePoint, but also some third-party applications like Salesforce. And we're also mapping out the path to my Oracle SBC. So let's drill into this detail and see what that looks like. So here we see a hop-by-hop analysis of the path that is being taken from my frontline workers into the Oracle SBC. This is a raw view, so along the left here, I'm going to group this by network owner so I can see who owns each segment of the network. And now I can see the privately owned network components here, but also as the network traffic passes into ISPs and into the Oracle Akamai infrastructure. Along the right, I get a detailed view here of round trip time through each of those network owners. I see there is a bit of a delay being introduced through the NTT portion of the network. And I can also look at this by jitter or packet loss as well. In both cases here, they look pretty good. So we're doing this for Teams, for all the Microsoft services, any third-party endpoints that you may be relying on. You can define that as an endpoint here and then model out what that looks like in terms of the experience for your users as they reach those services. And if there is a problem, who's to blame? Who do I need to go and call and find out how I fix this performance problem? So we're going to jump back into the analytics interface. And the last thing I want to cover here is the application performance. And this is made up of a couple of different things. One, we get information from Microsoft in terms of bulletins posted in the tenant. But I want to drill into some of the synthetic transaction capabilities that Martello delivers with Vantage DX. So here in Paris, where my frontline workers are, I'm testing proactively a number of different workloads across Teams of the Microsoft 365 stack. And so I'm going to drill down into the details here. And along the left, we see all the workloads that we are testing. And when I say testing, we are testing these proactively 24/7 with what we call a robot. And these robots behave like a user does, interacting with Teams, Exchange, OneDrive, SharePoint, and so on, much like a user would. So we're not just looking at the endpoint and making sure it's available, but in the case of Teams, we're holding calls, we're posting content into channels. For Exchange, we're sending mail. OneDrive and SharePoint, we're uploading and downloading content, interacting with content, providing a realistic view of what the performance of Microsoft 365 will be for your users. And the idea is that, at the beginning of the demo, we've identified, which users are having problems. We could drill into the diagnostics to identify how are we going to fix the performance problems for those users. And now with the use of robots, we can put in monitoring in place, proactive monitoring in place, such that the next set of problems that are found by a robot, not a user, and IT gets a chance to solve these before a user even notices. So just to wrap up, I'm going to go back into our service view here for our frontline workers. And the last thing I'm going to touch on is we roll all this information up, and all this information being the call quality information we saw for the end users, the proactive synthetic transaction monitoring, the network diagnostics information in terms of what the path to the cloud or those third-party services look like, as well as bringing in third-party data. We saw some Cisco devices there, so whether those are being monitored by something like SolarWinds or PRTG, that can be covered, all brought into this singular service view, and then all wraps up into an SLA where month over month I can track how well is this performing specifically for my frontline workers. And for each hour of each day, I get a view into if there was a problem, what were the details of that problem, which I see along the bottom here. And it gives me a chance to understand if things didn't go very well this month, what can I do next month to deliver a better service? And here I can see some of those things here that were not performing well this particular month. I hope this gives you a good overview in terms of what we can do with Vantage DX. Stay tuned for more videos where we'll dive into more details for some of the features that I just glossed over, but I hope you enjoyed today's video.